G'day, ZiggyD here, and in today's video I'm going to be giving you guys a bit of speculation and analysis based on the teasers we've gotten for the new skill Reave. Now, as you can see there, we've got this screen cap that was posted a few days ago teasing the skill, and we've also been given a bit of a post, if I bring it over here, with some details around the skill, some of the very specifically worded details which we can conclude a few things about how the skill works from. So, let's jump straight into it because I'm pretty keen to take a look at this skill. It's got some interesting mechanics about it, and I think there's going to be a lot of interesting builds created from it that are going to have a very different playstyle. And based on recently other released skills that they've put into the game, like Searing Bond for example, I think they're really trying to get skills into the game now that change the way you play dramatically. So they could go ahead and implement another melee skill that just hit in a different way or did damage in a slightly different way. But I think they really want to put in skills instead that make you create much more interesting and dynamic builds around them and make you play very significantly different. For example, with Searing Bond, instead of putting your totems in a room and letting them clear out the room, you'd have to put your totems down and then walk around mobs in a certain way to position your Searing Bond beams, and that made for a very different gameplay style, and I think we're going to see some similar stuff happening with Reave. Perhaps, we're still speculating. So, let's get the basics out of the way first. It is a dexterity intelligence skill, and it will only work with claws, daggers, and one-handed swords. Now this has been a part, or a thing, a bit of a gap in the market in terms of skills that we've needed, especially AoE skills. There's currently no AoE skills for claws, especially at the moment. Claws and daggers are pretty lacking in AoE skills. People have resorted to using things like Whirling Blade, or they've gone to pretty much the non-melee skills like Lightning Strike to be able to deal with AoE. Or they've done things like, since the recent implementation of Melee Splash, they've combined other non-AoE skills with Melee Splash to make sort of rudimentary AoE skills. But this one is going to be an AoE skill at heart. So essentially, it attacks with a small AoE in front of your character, and it's a non-targeted melee attack. Now the wording of the post for that is, I believe, using the skill causes you to attack a small area in front of you. Now that is very specifically worded because it means that it's not a true melee skill in terms of things like, let's look at Infernal Blow. Although it has an AoE tag on it, it has an AoE secondary effect, you have to actually target and hit those mobs. The way this is worded makes it sound like instead of targeting those mobs exactly, you can just target in between them, and the AoE of the effect of the skill effect will actually hit the mobs around. So as you can see with this shadow here attacking with his Reave skill, we've got this little burst of light here. Kind of looks a bit like a supernova, so maybe we'll see some cool supernova builds coming out of this. But we've got a relatively small AoE, enough to hit maybe 2, 3, 4 mobs if they're packed up closely on top of each other. And that's pretty important because it means it's going to be a much easier skill to use, especially if you're going to get a lot of AoE increasing passives and things like that in the future. So that's pretty interesting. So the next thing that I wanted to cover was that when you actually attack with this skill and when it hits enemies, now it sounds like from the way it's worded that it's not per enemy hit, it's just per hit. So kind of like the Frenzy skill, for example. Per hit essentially, per attack, you get a buff, and it's a very short duration buff. Based on the fact that we can see this guy just having attacked and only having a 1 second buff up here, we can pretty much say that it's going to be like a 1 second buff per stack. Now the way this is worded is that each time you get this buff stack, it increases the AoE of the skill. So essentially the more of these stacks you get, the further out this skill is going to increase in AoE. So we might see it growing out like from here, like we have now. As you get a few more hits, it grows out to here, and then grows out to here, and then hopefully maybe you're eventually filling the screen with this skill. Now what this means is that characters stacking a lot of attack speed are going to be able to build up this buff very quickly, and that's going to be very important because it's such a short duration buff. 1 second is not enough time to be able to attack a pack, build up a bit of a buff, then go to the next pack and to continue attacking it. Now, another interesting part of this, and I'll try and find the exact wording for this is here. If you use a skill other than Reave, the area of effect is reset. So, what that means is if you use Whirling Blades to close the distance between a second pack in the hopes of keeping your buff up and being able to move around really quickly, you're actually going to lose that buff. Now, This is also pretty interesting because the buff effect from this increases the AoE radius of Reave. However, what's not clear is that whether this also increases the AoE of other skills. I'm hoping it does because that'll make for very interesting builds. Essentially what that means, if that is the case, we can stack up, 10, I don't know how many stacks there'll be, let's say we can stack up 10 stacks of the Reave buff, only have them for a very short duration, and then essentially have a finishing blow, another AoE skill that we use to finish off the enemies that will benefit from that increased AoE. And that will of course spend that charge. Kind of like when you have skills like Flicker Strike that expends frenzy charges, we can have now other skills, other AoE skills that expends your Reave charge or your Reave bonus. So that'll be very interesting if that happens. However, the wording's not really clear on whether that will be the case or whether you'll just lose the buff if you happen to use another skill. So let's go back to this losing the buff business. What that means is that, firstly, we're going to need characters with very high attack speed to be able to stack this buff up and get full use of it versus packs. Because if you're like a one-shotting sort of character, like you're doing a lot of damage, which, with claws, daggers, and one-handed swords isn't usually the case. But let's say, you're stacking a lot of damage instead of attack speed, you're only going to be able to buff this up a few times and only get a small, very small AoE. However, if you have a very fast attack speed with your daggers, claws, and swords, then you're going to be able to build that up much further and hit a lot more mobs on screen. So that's pretty cool. It also means it could work really nicely with things like life gain on hit and other on-hit effects, especially since you're going to have attack speed and you're going to be hitting a ton of mobs. Things like blind could be really, really cool with this skill. So, as Chris says, it's designed to synergize really well with players building around attack speed, area of effect bonuses, and on-hit effects, which counts for things like blinds and things like that. Now, this skill will be included in patch 0.11.4, which is coming in a few weeks, and I'm looking very much forward to the release of this skill. I'm planning on building a bit of a shadow. It seems like I believe it says here it'll be available to the shadows from low levels, so it should be something that we can get from a quest reward somewhere in normal as well. So I'm hesitant as to whether I should level up a shadow or whether I should just run a shadow when it comes and that sort of thing, because it's such a low level one. It might be nice and easy to get this particular skill, but that's pretty interesting stuff. So anyway, I think that's about it for my analysis at the moment based on the details we have. I think the only other thing I wanted to mention was that I think move speed builds will be really good with this. So that means the Ranger in particular has access to some pretty good move speed nodes, and there's also some good move speed uniques and things that synergize well with the Shadow and the Ranger, where they are on the skill tree in terms of frenzy charges and things like that. So, Blood Rage, Frenzy stacking, CI characters that use the increased attack speed from Frenzy and the increased move speed from those uniques to get around really fast and attack really fast and stack up this AoE effect, also using the Templar and Witch AoE nodes. I think we could be seeing builds like that. That's kind of the ideas that are coming together in my mind in terms of using this skill. But rest assured, when the skill does release, or if we get any more significant details about it, I will be making a video on it. Hopefully, maybe. It's also interesting enough to build a build around. It's certainly looking like it will be. Anyway, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on the skills, and if you have any different speculations to myself. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.